you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. But while more and more millionaires and investors are moving into the city, it's putting a real squeeze on the middle class who are having to leave. We looked everywhere. We couldn't find anything.
So as more and more millionaires move to New York, the middle class here has fewer and fewer options. And as the middle class struggles with simultaneous cost of living and housing crises, it almost looks as if New York is replacing them with a new and growing rich class who are the only ones that can afford it here. And the worst part about that is nobody running this place seems to care.
A new study shows that the number of millionaires opting to rent instead of buying property has nearly tripled since 2015.
The number of people making more than $1 million in household income a year who choose to rent instead of buy shot up 171% in just 5 years.
We looked everywhere. We couldn't find anything. I was seeing things on the market for like $4,500. If I wanted to stay even in Bed-Stuy, I mean, this is not Midtown that we're talking about, right? Like I'm talking about central Brooklyn.
In 2022, people leaving New York at the fastest rate were making less than $172,000 a year. That's according to a report from the Fiscal Policy Institute. They also found that more than a third of those leaving New York State were moving in search of affordable housing.
It's the wealthy moving into the bigger towns. There's no question, right? So the New Yorks, the Chicagos, the Los Angeles, the San Franciscos. If you make $200,000, $300,000 a household income, you can't afford to live in the city anymore.
Here's the simple truth that is underneath all of these sobering statistics. We simply have not built enough housing.
So millionaires are moving to New York City in droves, and they're renting up all the available apartments. And none of our elected officials seem to have a problem with this, even though most of them got where they are promising to protect the little guy, who now has to battle $10 milk and other overpriced necessities at the grocery store, only to get crushed by sky-high rents when he walks into his apartment after a long day of work, earning a paycheck that evaporates before the direct deposit even hits. And even if you've got a six-figure income of, say, $150,000, that's going to be whittled down to around $36,000 of spending power after you pay your rent and buy your food. Which is insane because in most of America, highly skilled professionals with six-figure incomes are just fine. But here they're barely hanging on, living in tiny one-room apartments without the ability to start families, or even live with someone who isn't their roommate, as many depend on others they barely know to split rent in overpriced apartments or go homeless. And that brings us to the real reason the middle class here is being forced out. If you won't build new apartments for these new millionaires, they're just gonna come into town and rent whatever everyone else has been renting, forcing prices to go through the roof, literally, because we're in a housing crisis with only around 1.4% of apartments even available to be rented. Sure, these buildings are hundreds of years old and are falling apart, but with the $4,000 a month average rents they're able to fetch, New York City's dwindling housing stock is quickly disappearing as wealthy renters take over. But as you're about to see, just because you're a millionaire and you come here and rent an apartment, well, that doesn't mean you're gonna get to live like one. Yeah, I don't think this is a problem normal people will run into over the course of their daily existence, and that's a good thing because this is a one-bedroom apartment and the rent is $5,000 a month. Well, $49.95 is the asking rent, so you can pay an extra $5 a month if you want to. But the thing is, we're in a part of town right now that is too expensive for middle-class residents. And even though this place is very nice and is probably going to rent quickly, the person who rents it will probably be someone who's pretty well off.
They report a 45% growth in millionaires in the last decade here, despite dire predictions during the pandemic of the rich fleeing New York. But while more and more millionaires and investors are moving into the city, it's putting a real squeeze on the middle class who are having to leave.
Did you just hear that? New York City's experienced a massive rise in the number of millionaires living here, But as we're gonna see today, it hasn't experienced a massive rise in the number of apartments available to rent. And that's certainly not the fault of this landlord. He already owns his building and renovated his apartment. But since the city restricts the supply of apartments by not letting anybody build anything, the prices on the places that are available keep going up. And in this type of situation, everyone loses. Wow, that is some water pressure right there. It's pretty good. And for $5 grand a month, I mean, come on, it should feel like a 5-star hotel. And it does. But there's no way average people can rent apartments like this anymore. And it's sad for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a 1-bedroom apartment. How many people are you gonna live here with? And second of all, even if you move in this year and you can afford the rent, what's gonna happen next year? It could go up and then you'll be living out on the streets. That is not a pigeon, it's a mourning dove. And at least with the prices of these apartments going up, the pigeons have been replaced with something that is more peaceful.
Dana Dennis was born and raised in Brooklyn, and together with her husband, they make over $100,000 a year, but had to move to New Jersey after having their first child. They say they couldn't afford a 2-bedroom anywhere they wanted to live.
I was seeing things on the market for like $4,500. If I wanted to stay even in Bed-Stuy, I mean, this is not Midtown that we're talking about, right? Like I'm talking about Central Brooklyn.
And she's not the only one. In 2022, people...
So this family, they're succeeding by all accounts, but the problem is this city doesn't have apartments for people who succeed anymore. And this is not the fault of landlords or even the rich people that are renting these places. No, the real problem is that New York is a city where local laws are not amenable to the construction of new buildings, and that's why you don't have new buildings. You have old buildings that might be new inside, but aren't brand new. That's part of the problem. And the other part of this problem is that many people who are rich, they don't want to buy property around here like they used to. This article features a quote from a guy who's a millionaire, and he pays $19,000 a month because he's disappointed in what he could buy with his millions. And not everybody wants to take millions of dollars and dump it into something that's just gonna either lose value or cost them more money as a primary residence than renting something and just paying a one-time fee. No taxes, no maintenance, nothing. You just pay the rent, that's it. But even though the rich might be surviving and complaining about it, as you're about to see, this housing crisis we've got going on here, it's too much for the middle class, and many people sadly have to leave the city altogether.
In 2022, people leaving New York at the fastest rate were making less than $172,000 a year. That's according to a report from the Fiscal Policy Institute. They also found that more than a third of those leaving New York State were moving in search of affordable housing.
It's the wealthy move.
So there's no affordable housing here anymore. And if that's what you want, then you're gonna have to go somewhere else and find it. That's how it works. We're in a housing crisis. We aren't building new stuff. Look out the window here. Is this charming? Is this quaint? Absolutely. But what's not charming or quaint are the fact that these 5-story buildings are forcing people to live elsewhere. And if the only kind of buildings we're allowed to have here are the ones that were built over 100 years ago, or are replacement buildings that come in and are also 5 stories, you're never gonna have enough room for the number of people that wanna live here. And although that might protect neighborhoods like this one from evil skyscrapers, while protecting the high prices of apartments from getting any lower, it does that at the expense of everybody else.
New York City's Mayor Eric Adams has a City of Yes plan, enticing developers to address the worst housing crunch in 5 decades, expected to enable tens of thousands of new units over the next 15 years. But that wasn't in time for Luke and Sasha, who also left. They just couldn't make it work anymore.
$4,000 is a lot of money, and they still couldn't find a 2-bedroom.
So there are plans out there to create tens of thousands of new apartments, which might sound great. Experts are saying we need hundreds of thousands of apartments. Right here, 560,000 apartments. This isn't gonna happen. We're not gonna make it. Prices are just gonna keep going up, which means the entire housing crisis in this city is only gonna get worse. And that's at a best case scenario. All because the people who could pass laws to do something about this don't seem interested in doing it. And most maddeningly and frighteningly of all, the plans that are on the table right now to fix New York City's housing crisis, well, they might just end up making it worse. That building across the street. It's only 3 stories. You've got the top floor, the middle floor, and then that's the door. This is the problem with our housing crisis. We have 3-story buildings. Why? The obvious answer is it's illegal to put anything else here if this place ever were to fall down, which it looks like it might in the near future. It's old. Everything here's old. But the reason it all looks like this is because these buildings are irreplaceable. And that's because whatever buildings we have today are going to resemble whatever buildings we have tomorrow. That's the law. Changing it would be the simple solution to our housing problems, but the problem is the people who are running for mayor, well, let's just say this isn't on their radar at all.
Let's build affordable housing for members of the community.
Leaning into his experience as both governor of New York and former HUD secretary, Andrew Cuomo rolled out his housing plan, but others running for mayor were quick to pounce once the plan was posted online. There were grammatical issues, and this footnote appears to reference the use of ChatGPT to locate an article on rent-stabilized.
Oh boy, I don't know if that plan's gonna work, and he's leading the field of candidates right now, so the plan we get may end up being written by ChatGPT. But what might surprise you is that's not the reason it's a bad plan. The problem is these issues are beyond what the mayor is able to accomplish. Look at this, the building that's going in here, it's the same height as everything around it, and it's not even built yet. That's not gonna solve our housing problems. In fact, with new rules in place for housing, how wide hallways and stuff have to be, the number of people living here today may be less than whatever was here before. Old buildings have super narrow hallways. There's no room for an elevator. They may not meet certain ADA requirements that we have today, which is why it's more important than ever that we build stuff that's gonna be higher than whatever gets squeezed in here. But as you're about to see, some of the other housing plans on the table might be even worse.
Candidate for mayor and Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani's signature housing proposal is to freeze the rent for the more than 2 million rent-stabilized New Yorkers. We asked him about using
freezing rents. So in theory, this sounds good. If rent's going up too fast, stop it from going up, then it remains cheap. But there's a big problem with that. Rents are going up because that's the only direction they can go. They can't stay the same. And if you lock in all the rents people have today and they're never gonna change, nobody's gonna move. That's gonna screw up everything. And instead of freezing someone's rent at, say, $5,000 a month so that they can live in their 1 bedroom for longer than if it were to go up over the next few years, really need to do is introduce a little competition, something this deli faces every single day. The candy and soda they sell inside can't be more expensive here than it is in the place down the street, or else no one is gonna come in here and buy it. But what if this was the only candy store in town? Well, then the people running it could charge whatever they wanted and they would still sell out. And that's what's happening here with apartments. You can't force him to only charge so much, then he's gonna run out and there's not gonna be any candy for anybody. And if you freeze the prices in this housing market, you're just gonna have even worse shortages than you have today. And the thing that's so maddening about this is that there's actually a way to lower rents, but nobody wants to do it.
In this city, 1.4% vacancy rate. That's the lowest in 6 decades. That's a result of decades of underproduction, of zoning rules that are at best outdated and too complicated. The solution is simple. We need to build more housing, build it in every...
It's crazy. Housing isn't complicated to fix. And everything we're experiencing today in the New York City housing market that's forcing out the middle class was entirely predictable and preventable. Instead, our goal is to keep things in this city the exact way you see them right now, by not pushing to change the law so different stuff can be built in place of the stuff we got now. But even though that would be absolutely lovely, it's never gonna happen, and you know why? Because there's this idea out there that if somebody solves a problem and makes money doing it, they've done something wrong. And if you're in a housing crisis and you let people build something taller than 3 stories and they do it and make money, that's offensive to many of the people running for mayor right now, some of whom are on the city council and have never tried to pass anything like that. And one of the excuses we get for that is, well, it's so expensive to build anything here. These developers, if we loosen things up, they're just gonna come in and build apartments for rich people. Well, remember, the rich people, they're taking the apartments that everybody else is supposed to live in. But look, this is exactly how you lower rent, through a process called a migration chain, which is what happens when a higher income household moves into a newly built unit. Their previous unit gets re-rented to another household who also moves from another unit, and so on and so forth, creating a chain of moves within the original housing market that eventually extends to even low and moderate income ranges. You need turnover. That's how you get people to move into apartments that they can't afford. You create a whole bunch of apartments and you create a whole bunch of movement, and that is gonna bring down prices. If you lock rents in place, everything's gonna disappear. Nobody's gonna move. If someone does move, that place is gonna have even higher rent because it's the only one left. That's what we're seeing today. Or am I wrong about that? Should we freeze rents instead? Is that a good idea? Should we say that landlords can only charge so much? Do we need more socialism? Let me know. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.